Fear and Hunger is inspired in part by Kentaro Miura's Berserk, which isn't surprising as every single dark fantasy written since 1989 has the same inspiration. One similarity across the two works is the role of their main antagonists, Griffith and Lagarde. Both characters are extremely similar down to their backstories and appearances, and both are regarded by fans as uniquely reprehensible. However, I think through looking deeper at these villains we can understand more about what each series has to say about humanity as a whole. Griffith and Lagarde are both depicted as evil individuals, but in both series there is a precedent for both manifest ideas and narrative determinism. In short, the theory put forward today is that both characters aren't individual evil people, but rather the manifestations of humanity at large within their respective settings. Manufactured gods of humanity born of a desire for meaning. They may appear as humans initially, but both are much more than that. In short, these characters were always going to exist in these worlds. These figures are creations of a greater consciousness designed for a specific purpose. These characters are not people as you or I understand them, but rather the embodiments of a central concept in both worlds. Lagarde is just as much a manifestation of a concept as Grogoroth, and Griffith is much the same. This may seem far-fetched, but let's start with two concepts core to both works and then look at the evidence in text. These two concepts are manifest ideas and fate. In both universes, there is an idea of concepts being given shape. In Fear and Hunger there exists the Green Hue, a place beyond time and space wherein concepts and ideas manifest and take shape as primordial old gods. Of this phenomenon, the in-universe scholar and priest Donovan Hugo writes, "Once an older god is born, it has existed forever. A god like a human soul is not constrained by linear time and space. It can reincarnate multiple times within our history and future history without us knowing any better. They spawn from the green stream, but which spawns first? An older god in its physical form, or the concept our consciousness gives birth to?" In Berserk, the collective human psyche takes shape in the form of the idea of evil, an ancient consciousness that says of itself, "Humans desired reasons. Reasons for pain, reasons for sadness, reasons for life, reasons for death. Reasons why their lives were filled with suffering, reasons why their deaths were absurd. They wanted reasons for the destiny that kept transcending their knowledge, and I produced those, as it is what I have been brought into existence for." In both fictional universes, we see powerful ideas taking shape, being willed into being by the collective unconscious. What people at large desire and want takes shape and becomes a physical entity. Of human desire, German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer writes, "For if anything in the world is desirable, so desirable that even the dull and uneducated herd in its more reflective moments would value it more than silver and gold, it is that a ray of light should fall onto the obscurity of our existence, and that we should obtain some information about this enigmatical life of ours, in which nothing is clear except its misery and vanity." This echoes the concept spoken about by the idea of evil. Humans want to find meaning in their suffering, and their collective desire for this manifests in myriad ways across the two settings. Most obviously in Berserk it's through the egg of the perfect world, which rebirths Griffith directly, and in Fear and Hunger it is through the eponymous god of Fear and Hunger, the daughter of Lagarde. In both instances, deific beings are born of a deep emotional need for meaning in suffering and misery, tied explicitly to these two characters. Another concept explored in depth through the two settings is fate. In Berserk, the God Hand member Void says that everything is within the flows of causality. All has been decided. Your lives were woven to meet this point. In Fear and Hunger there is no such bold declaration, but the series does make heavy use of prophecy, and the existence of soul types also indicate that certain people are simply predisposed to certain life paths. On top of this, there are frequent references to a grand scheme, though we get very little insight into it. And some characters, like the gods in the Hall of the New Gods, are able to tell the future to a limited degree. In short, everything that happens was always going to happen, with a few notable exceptions. For the vast majority of beings in this world, there is a degree of determinism. Your life will always play out in a very specific way, and everything happens for a reason. When combining these two concepts, the ideas that everything that happens is predetermined and particularly strong ideas can be willed into existence as physical beings, we have the foundations for our theory. Griffith and Lagarde as humans are embryonic concepts. They were created of a collective desire to bring about grand changes and meaning to suffering. Both are heavily associated with prophecy and have a unique ability to inspire. In service of their aim, both shed their human skin and come to fully embody humanity at large. Secret true gods of humanity, both walk the earth as something greater, influencing major world events and history. Through their parallel story paths, we can understand that in both settings, a collective desire for meaning has created these two extremely dark characters, these reflections of the best and worst of humanity as a whole. Both Griffith and Lagarde are living gods, creations of higher powers rather than mortal men. The idea of gods walking the earth as humans is a well-established precedent in both universes and in our own mythology, and the idea of a mortal life prefiguring divinity is particularly pronounced in the Christian faith, which is a major inspiration of both works. Again, this theory can seem very far-fetched, so let's now review the evidence. Even prior to their ascension, Lagarde and Griffith are shown as representative of what the wider series has to say about human nature. Both series are quite pessimistic, featuring large casts of cruel and amoral individuals. Fear and Hunger has a character outright state one potential reading of the series. The Tale of the Pocket Cat Volume 2 contains the following passage. Willem slid down a muddy hill and found himself in a large opening in the forest. In the middle of that opening, two giant baby-faced blindworms were caught in a wrestling match. The two bastards fought each other with all they got. They bit each other, clawed at each other, all while crying and wallowing loudly. Turkilo yelled from above that this is the nature of men, that just like those song-thrush chicks from earlier, this would be Willem's future once he grew up to be an adult. Humans were ruthless in their pursuit for riches and wealth. Did Willem really want to take part in such fierce competition? In both series, sadism and dominance, what Turkilo calls the nature of men, is rewarded with power. In Berserk, the cruelest and most amoral individuals are blessed with Behelits and granted transformations into higher beings called apostles. In Fear and Hunger, numerous depraved individuals are granted a similar divine blessing, be it the reborn sulfur cultists or the many dungeon dwellers corrupted by the god of the depths. There is a direct link between violence and power, and the nature of humans in both settings is callous. Again, both series echo Schopenhauer, who wrote, "It seems to me that the idea of dignity can only be applied in an ironical sense to a being whose will is so sinful, whose intellect is so limited, whose body is so weak and perishable as man's." This concept of sinful will is at the core of both series. Though there are moments of hope and kindness, often shown through characters we're supposed to like Guts from Berserk or Kahara from Fear and Hunger, the majority of beings in both settings are cruel and self-interested, willing to do anything to get ahead. Overwhelmingly, both series show the will of humanity to be fallible and even downright evil. Even the aforementioned good characters have moments of evil within their stories. This is the version of humanity that Griffith and Lagarde are to become figureheads of. Both are mercenary captains, individuals who are willing to kill and have those under them die for wealth, status and glory. In this alone, they perfectly represent the nature outlined by Turkilo, which echoes Schopenhauer. We also get a glimpse into the series' ideas on fate, as both are able to survive near impossible odds with relative frequency. Whilst Lagarde publicly dismisses ideas of prophecy and determinism in his human form, at least when pressed on it by D'Arce, upon approaching the Golden Throne he reveals he is following the prophecy attached to him and actually puts a lot of faith in it. Griffith is likewise conscious of the whims of fate to some degree even prior to his ascension. He speaks to Guts of the true elite, individuals who are ordained by unseen forces to be important. Griffith is entirely right in this theory. He survives numerous assassination attempts and tense battles as well as years of torture because he has to survive for his fate to play out. Lagarde is less lucky. He can die in Fear and Hunger, but he is always alive again by the events of Termina, meaning that his death and rebirth were likely part of the prophecy attached to him, or even the grand scheme that the new gods frequently reference. The unique cruelty of both figures in service of a goal in human life is a precursor to their greater roles within their stories, their single-minded and selfish ambition, an echo of collective humanity. Lagarde's massacre of the Older Guardian settlement in Vinland to obtain the Cube of the Depths, and Griffith's schemes against his political enemies, including the assassination of a child, are both evidence enough of this. The question now is, why are such vicious utilitarians given the power to become key decision makers who determine the course of human history? To understand this, we need to look at what humans in both settings want, as well as what they think of themselves, and then look at how Lagarde and Griffith answer this. In Fear and Hunger, there is a concept created by Nasra called the human dilemma. Quoting him, "How could a mere human ever ascend to true godhood? An older god represents purity, pure ideologies and untainted concepts. Humans are incapable of that. Everyone has their own truth, their own version of purity. Yet, there are ones like Ulmer, or even more recently that girl, what's her name, from a few hundred years back. That is the dilemma. How? How can there be examples of purity regardless of your human limitations? That is the human dilemma. Humanity is too diverse a thing to ever be fully accounted for. The concept of humanity cannot be boiled down to any one singular thing. That said, there are commonalities found in everyone. In both series, this seems to be similar to Schopenhauer's takes on human nature, a desire for meaning, an obsession with suffering, and a shame in our frailty. Lagarde and Griffith are both representatives of this. They bring suffering and meaning through it. Their human lives see them as frail and weak towards the end, but strong in their rebirth. Their mortal lives are microcosms for humanity at large, all the desires and meanings spoken about by Turculo and the idea of evil. In fact, one of the last things Lagarde can say before his ascension is the following. None of the grand kingdoms history books speak on stand on pure foundations. They were all built on bloodshed and violence. But what if there was a way that wouldn't require thousands of soldiers on opposing sides shedding their lives? What if such a grand kingdom only required one soul to succumb to the darkness, only one soul to be tainted? Lagarde and Griffith are both conscious of the need for violence. They're mercenaries and killers, but they also envision a world where the violence has meaning. Both have lofty dreams of new world orders, and both achieve their ascension to push for this. Griffith through Falconia, Lagarde through Bremen and the new green hue of logic. This duality, ending violence through violence, making suffering worth it through suffering, is part of what makes them so compelling as envoys and representative gods of humanity. They both represent a desire for peace and a morbid fascination with war. Remember here that particularly strong ideas can take physical form in these settings, strong ideas like an overall holistic view of humanity inherent to every human. Though both series have their own Christianity stand-ins that are largely divorced from these two characters, both of them follow a darkly inverted Christ-like characterization. As Christ set an example to be followed in his mortal life, Griffith and Lagarde's mortal life showcase traits that they will carry into their divinity and seem to reflect the reality of humanity. Life as it is de facto, not how it could be. Through their metamorphosis, we see further evidence of the roles of these characters within their respective settings, and proof of them being essential figures to the fate of humanity. Throughout Fear and Hunger, transformation and rebirth is a recurring theme, accented with the iconography of the butterfly across both games. Lagarde bursts from a cocoon during the rebirth of the Lover spell in D'Arce's S ending. Like the butterfly, he is reborn. A similar metamorphosis is a feature in the two known Ascended gods who shed their mortal skin, as well as all of the new gods in the series who become wholly new beings upon ascension. Furthermore, the dungeons of Fear and Hunger are cocoon-like. There is a transformative aspect to the dungeon seen through many of its inhabitants, making Lagarde's choice to confine himself to this particular dungeon interesting. Griffith is likewise reborn, but from an egg. Twice, actually, once during the eclipse and once more from the egg of the perfect world. Both characters are associated with rebirth, not just for themselves, but for the wider setting. Griffith's rebirth brings magic back to the world, and Lagarde's coincides with a new era much like the Industrial Revolution. As the butterfly has the potential to be a butterfly when they are a caterpillar, these characters were born with the potential for godhood. Their ascensions are not coincidences or things they work towards, they are predetermined points the characters have been ordained to reach. The God Hand welcomes Griffith as Femto, a divine being who demands respect. His role in the progression of fate is clear. But the same is not true of Lagarde, a man forgotten to history, supplanted by his daughter, and left to rot in the dungeon. But Lagarde's prophecy is actually not that well understood by the fandom, and his role in the story is yet to fully pen out. His purpose is alluded to in New God dialogue. They say, "The chosen entity, tales both penned and crooned flutter about this being even in the throes of his mortality. The genesis of the prophecy remains ensconced in the veils of ambiguity, yet its veracity is doubtlessly disputable. The man, however, remains an enigmatic spectacle. Distinctive and uncanny, his role in the grand tapestry of fate is obscure, but indubitably, he has ignited an expansive conflagration." There's a lot to unpack here, and a lot of those words are kind of archaic and odd, but I'll explain it. First off, even if Lagarde is currently alive and in your party, the new gods still talk about his throes of mortality, implying that his death and rebirth are inevitabilities within the grand scheme, something that they're aware of. This is practically confirmation of my earlier assertion that Lagarde was fashioned for a post-mortal existence. He was always supposed to die and be reborn. Secondly, we don't fully know what Lagarde's prophecy is, it's only ever alluded to, and he honestly gets closer to what we do know of it in Termina's ending A than he ever does in the first Fear and Hunger. uniting warring states through conquest, bringing prosperity through machinery, and ruling not with a golden staff, symbolic of royalty and the old feudal order, but with 1,000 pitchforks, shaping popular consensus with the Logic Project. In short, we don't really know everything about Lagarde's prophecy, what it actually means, or how far into it he's got. It could have a much bigger scope than we know about, and he seems to be closer to it now than ever. Miro has said that in Fear and Hunger 3, Lagarde will become your favourite character. Perhaps we'll finally get to see his prophecy play out in full. The role of Lagarde, the purpose behind his creation, is most clearly shown with the final word the new gods use, conflagration, meaning to destroy, usually by burning. Lagarde's role in the series is growth from destruction, a marriage of the concepts of Sylvian and Grogoroth. He does this twice over, one time for each game. He destroys, and then something new grows from the ashes. In my prior video on Divine Evolution, I posited that humans are the contradictory servants of both gods, and in this sense again, Lagarde is a perfect quiet god of humanity. He represents both aspects. The human dilemma is the concept that our limited scope makes us too imperfect to be gods. Lagarde, through his studying of the souls of the new gods, channeling the torment of Jambara through his imprisonment, pondering the cube to reach enlightenment like Valtiel, and massacring the older guardians to mimic domination in the style of Francois, we see a concerted effort to see the world through all eyes. He studies the old gods and the new, and lives by their example. He overcomes the dilemma by representing all aspects of his domain, humanity. Though Lagarde doesn't operate with as much power as most gods, old or new, his influence and reach is subtle, like the old gods, and his frailty may just be another aspect of him representing humanity. We must also consider that his child has the potential to become an ascended god, a kind of being not seen since Ulmer, who is said to have been personally crafted by the gods. What allows him this ability? It's because Lagarde is a silent god, a manifest concept, just one with a human face. The metamorphosis of both characters, like with butterflies, is simply a progression of their form that was always going to happen. These two characters were willed into existence and through their metamorphosis become the guiding hands of their patron race, the unseen gods of their respective settings, equal parts great and terrible, true representations of humanity. So there's ample textual evidence and precedent to assume that there is a degree of prophecy and determinism to both characters' arcs. We know for a fact that even if they aren't explicit reactions to the human desire for meaning, they do wield godly powers and oversee the architecting of a new world. Everything in these settings is willed into existence, it's manifested almost. So, in order for these characters to be able to do all of this, they have to come from that same inspiration. The question now is why, and if they were chosen for this role, what does this say about how both series will play out? Analysing the role of these two characters has been fun because this is the part where Lagarde detaches from his inspiration and takes a markedly different path. There are lines of dialogue in each series that are nearly identical, but have hugely different contexts. In Berserk, Griffith is an agent of causality. He works with the God Hand, these ancient primordial forces, to keep the world moving in cycles. His kingdom of Falconia represents this. It's an echo of both the old capital city of Wyndham and the capital city of Emperor Geiserich's realm, an ancient kingdom. It's the protagonists and heroes of the story who challenge the concept of cycles. The character Flora says, "By no means is causality a perfect circle. Rather, it is a spiral. These children are not limited to the same path that you and I followed." In Berserk, the primary antagonist represents stagnation and cycles, whilst the heroes represent a struggle against fate and a capacity for change. Lagarde subverts this in Termina, with the following dialogue. "Chaos is but a transitional phase. Where it leads determines whether that chaos is a negative force or not. I embraced the chaos and saw where it led me. The endless cycle of mankind's struggle for power had to lead somewhere. I twisted the circles into a spiral. Each cycle pushed us further and further from the old world, closer to our true potential. We're now at the climax of that spiral as we speak. We cannot control the land laid down by primal forces, but we can build a new one." This is a repetition of Flora's sentiment from Berserk, the heroic concept at the heart of that series. This is the main point where the focus characters diverge, and we can look at the difference. Griffith and Lagarde are both gods that largely represent humanity, but Griffith is a lot more pessimistic, utterly driven by determinism and resigned to fate. In fact, duplicity and being a false idol are massive parts of Griffith's arc. What Lagarde represents is a more optimistic view of humanity. the idea of creating our own meaning through struggle. This is confirmed through that dialogue I've just gone through, but it's also heavily implied by his links to both the god of fear and hunger and logic. If Lagarde is an old god born of human existentialism, it makes sense he would lean heavily in favour of human autonomy, of them breaking free of any kind of control. Lagarde being a hidden and quiet old god who subtly affects human development can also be seen in his design. In his form as Kaiser, he is clearly modelled on the King in Yellow, even called the Yellow King at times, a fictional character created by Ambrose Bierce and developed most notably in the writings of Robert Chambers. Not only does Chambers describe the King in Yellow as a living god and one who has particular interest in humans, he also describes their influence as such. The ambitions of Caesar and Napoleon pales before that which could not rest until it had seized the minds of men and controlled even their unborn thoughts. He is a king whom emperors have served. So that's Lagarde, right? This is shown not only through his actions, fading into history and subtly controlling the world through politicking, but also through the creation of logic which can be said to control even unborn thoughts. In the past I've called Lagarde not a god but a god maker, but it seems in light of everything he's actually both. His actions, inspirations, design, motives, connections to fate and prophecy, and how obviously he embodies so many of the series' central themes and ideas about humanity, these all indicate divinity. Like his narrative forebear Griffith, Lagarde is a god who lived a mortal life but was always fashioned for greater things. Where he differs and Fear and Hunger detaches from its inspiration to become something entirely new is in what these greater things are. Much is made of how unforgiving and dark and cruel Fear and Hunger is as a setting, but where it subverts the tropes of its influences, it's actually a lot more optimistic. The cruel detached god with a side gig being the ruler of a country in Termina is a lot nicer and more benevolent in terms of motives than the one in the other setting. This is actually something that makes Fear and Hunger very unique. Most stories have a strong emphasis on cycles and stagnation. There's no shortage of fantasy series that seem to have existed in the low Middle Ages for millennia. That isn't the case here. The commitment to change and transformation is part of the entire series. My bug theory was all about this, but it's also very true of the humans, who progress at a rapid rate following Lagarde's emergence. It's no coincidence that his appearance coincides with a desire for change. His explosive conflagration is just another idea made manifest. Humans wish for meaning, they wish for progress, they wish to get somewhere. Lagarde at all turns represents this thought, he represents this thought made manifest. The world prior to his emergence is described as being stagnant, as being stuck. After he exists, it's basically full speed ahead all the time. Lagarde, chosen representative of humanity and potential old god, is quite out there, but stranger things have happened. When we consider all the clues, the connections to Berserk, as well as the in-universe support for the theory, I definitely think Lagarde, as being driven by the same primordial forces as the other inhabitants of the Green Hue, is very plausible. Whatever the case, I look forward to seeing what Miro has planned to turn this guy into our favourite character. Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked, subscribe and check out the Fear and Hunger Theory playlist. I try to bring new things to the series and touch on areas of the lore not massively explored, so there's definitely something novel there, if nothing else. Also, Happy New Year. Hopefully I get this out on time and this is a well-timed comment, and I'm not saying this in like February. If you made it this far into the video, why not do me a favour and drive up the engagement with a comment? You can drop your own theories, I always love reading them, or just write something stupid like, hi. Also, thank you to the channel members, their names should be scrolling by, so you can check those out. They're all very cool guys, I appreciate them a lot. Okay, unscripted ramble done. See you next time, bye.